Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to help you get up to speed on the important stuff fast.
That's the plan.
And today, you're probably here because you want to get a better handle on learning difficulties. Why some kids really struggle with reading or maybe math.
Or sometimes, yeah, sometimes both together.
Exactly. So we're diving into some pretty solid research today.
Yeah, it's a big one. A meta-analysis, actually. They pulled together the results from 74 different studies.
Wow, 74.
Yep. All looking at kids aged roughly 6 to 12. And our mission, really, is to help you understand something specific.
Okay, what's that?
When a child struggles with both reading and math, what researchers sometimes call RDMD, isn't it? Like just the sum of those two separate problems.
Right, like problem A plus problem B equals the total difficulty.
Or is it something more complex? Does having both difficulties create a different kind of cognitive profile altogether?
Okay, so like does 1 plus 1 equals 2, or does 1 plus 1 maybe equal?
Right.
Or even, I don't know, 1.8 in some areas.
That's a great way to put it. And the research we're looking at explored two main ideas, two models, to try and answer that for you.
Okay, lay them on us.
So first, there's the multi-deficit model.
Multi-deficit. Okay.
This basically says reading difficulties, or RD, and math difficulties, MD, they have their own specific causes, kind of like core issues.
Like phonological stuff for reading, maybe?
Exactly, like trouble processing sounds.
Mm,
And for math, it might be difficulty understanding number magnitude, what numbers actually mean.
gotcha.
But this model also says they can share some, let's call them general risk factors, things like working memory or attention, which you need for both.
Right, makes sense.
Now, within this model, you get two possibilities we need to help you grasp. First is additivity.
Okay, that sounds like the 1 plus 1 with X2 idea. The difficulties just pile up.
Precisely. You have the reading-specific issues, plus the math-specific issues, plus maybe some impact on those shared skills. It all adds up.
Simple enough. What's the other one?
The other possibility within this model is called under-additivity.
Under additivity. So, less than the sum of its parts. How does that work?
Well, it's a bit counterintuitive, maybe. It suggests that for those shared cognitive skills, like attention or memory, the impairment in kids with both RD and MD might actually be, well, less severe than you'd expect if you just added up the typical deficits seen in kids with only RD and kids with only MD.
Huh. That is unexpected. So struggling in two areas doesn't automatically mean those general skills take a double hit.
It's a possibility this model considers, yeah. Maybe the brain compensates differently, or the interaction isn't purely additive in those general areas.
Okay, intriguing. So that's the multi-deficit model with its additive and under-additive ideas. What's the second main model?
The second one is called the three independent disorders model.
3. I thought we were talking about reading, math, or both.
Right, but this model proposes that RG is one disorder, MD is another, and RDMD, the combination, is actually a third distinct disorder, not just a mashup of the first two.
Ah, okay. So RDMD would have its own unique cognitive fingerprint, so to speak.
Exactly. And this model often leads to the idea of over-additivity.
Okay, let me guess. This is the 1 plus 1 equals 3 scenario.
Sort of, yeah. It suggests that children with RDMD might show deficits that are more severe or perhaps qualitatively different than you'd predict by just combining the profiles of RD alone and MD alone.
So the interaction itself creates an extra layer of difficulty, maybe.
That's the idea. Maybe the combination impacts certain skills, like executive functions, much more profoundly than you'd see in the single deficit groups.
Okay, so two main competing ideas for you to consider. Multi-deficit, suggesting mostly additive effects with maybe some under-additivity in general skills, versus the 3 disorders idea, suggesting RDMD is distinct, possibly with over-additive effects.
You got it. And before we dig into what the meta-analysis found, let's just quickly define our terms for you again. RD reading difficulty, often problems with decoding words, reading fluently, understanding text.
And MD, math difficulty.
Usually involves challenges with number sense, calculations, maybe math reasoning.
And you mentioned earlier they often co-occur.
Oh yeah, significantly. Depending on the study and definitions, the comorbidity is estimated somewhere between like 11% and even up to 70%.
70%. Wow, that's huge. No wonder researchers want to figure out if it's additive or something else.
Exactly. That high rate of comorbidity really fuels the debate between these models. Is it shared causes, or does one problem somehow lead to the other, or is RDMD its own thing?
Right, so this massive meta-analysis looking at 74 studies, it tried to find some answers by comparing 3 groups of kids, right?
Yep. Kids identified with only RD, kids with only MD, and kids with RDMD, the comorbid group. And they looked at performance across three key areas:
Which were?
reading skills, obviously, math skills, and crucially, executive functions.
Okay, executive functions. We hear that term a lot. Can you give us the quick rundown for the listener?
Sure, think of EFs as the brain's management system. They're the higher level cognitive skills you use to um, plan, focus attention, remember instructions, juggle multiple tasks.
Like the CEO of the brain.
Kinda, yeah. Key ones often studied are things like working memory holding and manipulating information in your mind.
Like remembering steps in a math problem while you do it.
Exactly. Then there's inhibition, stopping yourself from doing something automatic or distracting.
Like not blurting out an answer. Or ignoring noise while reading.
And shifting, being flexible, switching between different tasks or rules.
Okay, so vital skills for learning pretty much anything.
Absolutely. They're considered domain general because you need them for reading, math, science, everything.
Got it. So the meta-analysis crunched the numbers from all those studies. Let's start with reading skills. What did they find? Did it look like additivity, under or over additivity for the RDMD group?
Okay, so for reading skills, the overall pattern pointed towards additivity.
Additivity. So 1 + 1 = 2.
Pretty much. The reading problems in the RDMD group looked like, essentially, the sum of the difficulties you'd see in the RD-only and MD-only groups.
And presumably the RD-only group had the biggest reading problems.
Yes, that came through consistently. Kids with RD showed larger reading deficits than kids with MD, which, makes intuitive sense.
Right. Any surprises in the reading results?
Well, one interesting finding was about phonological processing, that ability to work with sounds in words. As expected, it was a major issue for the RD group.
Yeah, the classic reading difficulty link.
But interestingly, they also found evidence of phonological processing difficulties, maybe to a lesser extent, but still present in the MD-only group, too.
Really? In the math-only group? That seems odd. How does sound processing link to math?
That's a fascinating question, isn't it? It suggests there might be some deeper connection than we usually think. Maybe it relates to how the brain handles symbols generally, or perhaps certain aspects of math do rely on verbal processing skills more than we realize, especially early on. Think about learning number words, counting sequences.
Huh. Okay, food for thought. So mostly additive for reading skills, RD group worst, but this interesting phonological link even in the MD group. What about specific reading tasks?
The deficits for both RD and RDMB kids were most pronounced in sort of general reading comprehension and decoding tasks, the core reading skills.
Okay, makes sense. Let's switch to math skills. What did the analysis show there? Similar pattern.
Largely, yes. The findings for math skills also generally suggested additivity for the RDMD group.
Additive again. And I'm guessing the MD-only group showed the biggest math deficits.
Correct. Kids with MD struggled more with math than kids with RD did. Again, aligns with expectations.
So for the RDMD kids, their math profile looked like a combination of the RD and MD profiles.
Broadly speaking, yes. But there was a specific nuance here that's worth highlighting for you.
Okay.
The RDMD group seemed to have particular difficulty with math tasks that involved symbolic processing.
Symbolic processing, meaning?
Meaning tasks that use language like number words, word problems, or visual math symbols like the numerals 1, 2, 3, or arithmetic signs. They struggled more with those compared to non-symbolic tasks.
What's a non-symbolic task? Like comparing groups of dots without counting?
Exactly. Tasks assessing basic number sense, like estimating quantities or comparing sets visually. The RDMD group's difficulty was more pronounced when those formal symbols and language came into play.
Ah, okay. So while the overall difficulty level might be additive, the type of math challenge for the RDMD kids leans more towards the symbolic, language-linked aspects.
That seems to be the pattern, yeah. Which again might tie back to that potential overlap between language processing and mathematical abilities we touched on with the phonological findings.
It's all starting to connect, maybe. Okay, so reading and math skills generally pointing towards additivity. Now, the big one, executive functions, those brain management skills. What happened there? Additive too.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit more complex for you to follow, but stick with us. Overall, looking at EFs broadly, the pattern again suggested additivity for the RDMD group.
Okay, so far so consistent.
Right. Both the RD-only and MD-only groups showed some impairments in various EF skills compared to typically developing kids. And generally, the RDMD group tended to show the most impairment across the board on these EF measures.
Which makes sense if difficulties are just adding up.
It does. But then the researchers drilled down into specific EF skills, and things got nuanced.
Nuanced how? Did the over or under additivity ideas pop up?
They did, specifically under additivity. First, though, one area where the RD&D group showed the most significant difficulty compared to the others was processing speed.
Processing speed, just how quickly you can do simple mental tasks.
Yep. They seemed generally slower at processing information.
Okay, that seems like it would impact both reading and math quite a bit.
Absolutely. But here's the twist. When they looked at other specific EFs, namely inhibition, shifting, and updating.
Okay, so resisting distraction, switching tasks, and managing info in working memory.
Exactly those. For those specific skills, there was actually some evidence supporting underadditivity.
Wait, under additivity. So the RDMD kids were less impaired on things like inhibition and shifting than you'd expect by just adding the deficits from the RD-only and MD-only groups.
That's what the data suggested for those particular functions, yes.
Wow, okay, that's the curveball you mentioned earlier. How do they explain that? Struggling with both reading and math somehow leads to relatively better performance in some key control functions compared to what you'd predict.
It's puzzling, isn't it? The researchers don't have a definitive answer, but they speculate. Perhaps facing challenges across multiple domains forces the brain to develop compensatory strategies in these specific EF areas. Or maybe the way these EFs interact is just fundamentally different when both reading and math systems are affected. It's not a simple sum.
So it's like the overall EF picture might look additive or even worse for RDMD, especially with processing speed, but hidden within that are these specific areas like inhibition and shifting where they might be doing slightly better than expected.
That's a good way to summarize the finding, yeah.
Yeah.
It complicates the simple additive picture.
It really does. So pulling it all together, what are the big implications for you, our listener? What should we take away from this deep dive into these cognitive profiles?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that the findings generally lend more support to the multi-deficit model.
The one saying RD and MD have distinct core issues, but maybe share some general factors.
Yes. The additivity found in reading and math skills, and even broadly in EFs, fits that model better than the idea of RDMD being a completely separate disorder with potentially massive over-additive effects across the board.
But with that important asterisk about under-additivity in some specific EFs?
Exactly. It's mostly additive, but with nuances. And understanding this is really practical for you, potentially.
How so?
Well, knowing these profiles can help tailor support. If we see additivity, it supports interventions that target the specific reading deficits and the specific math deficits, perhaps alongside support for general areas like processing speed.
Okay, treat the distinct problems.
But also, recognizing that link between phonological skills and maybe even early math, or the symbolic nature of difficulties in RDMD math, it highlights how important language skills are across the board.
So intervention for math might need to consider language components, and reading support might even indirectly benefit some math foundations.
Potentially, yeah. It suggests a more integrated approach could be beneficial for some kids, especially those with RDMD.
What about the finding that the MD-only group itself isn't uniform? That idea of heterogeneity.
That's crucial too. It reminds you that math difficulty isn't one single thing. Kids arrive at math challenges through different cognitive routes. Some might struggle with basic number sense, others more with procedures, others with spatial aspects.
So you can't just have a one-size-fits-all math intervention.
Definitely not. Assessment needs to dig into the specific cognitive weaknesses and strengths for that individual child. Personalized support is key, especially for MD.
And the study also mentioned considering things like ADHD, right?
Yes, the co-occurrence issue. Many kids with RD or MD also have attention difficulties like ADHD. This meta-analysis noted that whether studies included or excluded kids with ADHD could influence the EF findings, for instance.
So it's another layer of complexity for you to remember. It's hard to isolate just the learning difficulty sometimes.
It really is. In practice, you often have to consider the whole child, including attention, motivation, and other factors.
Okay. So, wrapping this up for you, the big picture seems to be when kids struggle with both reading and math, the cognitive challenges look largely like a combination and addition of the separate difficulties.
Mostly, yes. Additivity seems to be the general rule for the core reading and math skills.
But there's that fascinating exception, or at least nuance, in executive functions. While overall EFs might look additive or worse in RDMD, especially processing speed, some specific control skills like inhibition and shifting might show the surprising under-additivity. They might be less impaired than a simple sum would predict.
That's the intriguing part, yeah. It's just the interaction is more complex than just piling deficits on top of each other.
This research really gives you a much clearer, albeit complex, picture than just saying they struggle with both.
It does. It moves us towards understanding the how and why behind the struggles, which is the first step towards more effective help.
So, a final thought for you to chew on. How might this understanding, this mix of additive problems but potential areas of unexpected relative strength in EFs, change how educators or parents approach support?
Could we leverage those relatively less impaired ES? Could early identification of these profiles lead to interventions that are even more targeted?
Lots to think about. It shows how much more there is to learn about, well, how we learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We hope this dive has given you some valuable insights. We definitely encourage you to explore the research further if you're interested.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.